media world. It is loud. Well, today, welcome to Triangle BNI. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. We talk a lot about the digital media world and how loud and crowded it is. You need a professional team like the folks at Oak City Tech to help you navigate through that and get your message out to your current and future clients so you can grow your business. Go to oakcitytech.com. Tell them what you're looking for. I know they'll be able to help you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Manning. Each week on Triangle BNI, we bring you a local small business success story. If you're not familiar with BNI, it is Business Networking International. And in the triangle here, our little slice of heaven, we have Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill and the surrounding areas. And each week, about 33 chapters, almost 525 members get together. Our goal is to help each other grow our businesses. And our special guest this week, Brandon Woolley, owner of Fire Within Nutrition and Fitness. Brandon is in RD 48. They meet in Cary on Thursday mornings at 8:15. It's called Next Level. So if you want to meet a good group of folks in Cary, this is a group to hang out with. Brandon, good to see you. How are you today?
Doing well. Hope you are.
I am, and you preach and teach. Actually, you walk the walk and talk the talk. We're going to get into that. But as owner of Fire Within Nutrition and Fitness, this is something we all want to do. But as you know, there's a big difference between wanting to do something and do it to get into better shape. What holds us back?
Intrinsic motivation, I think, is the biggest key element. Um, and I think being able to find the deep motivating factor and comparing everything to that versus to the superficial goal of losing weight, not having that connection makes it harder to follow through. Um,
I like what you do because you take a comprehensive approach and the way you describe yours, it's sustainable science-based approach. Now, I like to break that down for people because what we knew 25 years ago was just quit eating as much and work out more, which is still technically correct. But there's so much information and data available to you, instructors like you that are helping everybody that just really help us understand why.
exactly. The old adage of, exercise more, eat less might work for a small population of people. But then what is it that you're eating more or less of? And for some people, it's not the right approach. For instance, I've had over 1,000 people where I've increased their caloric intake by up to 500 calories and they lost weight for the first time in decades. And sometimes people are under eating on these fad diets for such a long
Yeah.
time that their body starts storing fat as a mechanism. Or the other thing that can happen if you're not eating enough for your exercise output, it could be really taxing your adrenals, which eventually could disrupt your thyroid function and also make it harder to lose weight. So it really has to be an individualized approach specific to your hormones.
Those diets are interesting because a lot of them are based on the right concept, but a lot of times we end up depriving our body of carbs or, something like that, that a lot of times, if you don't know what you're doing, like you said, it can be a negative.
Right. I could make somebody lose 30 pounds in a month, but it's not going to stay off. So some of these fad diets, they'll get you results. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm interested in how is it going to affect hormonal output? And is it going to be more to your detriment in the following years? And studies show 1 to 2 pounds a week is the most sustainable kind of weight loss. When we lose it quicker, it puts the body's hormonal system into kind of a sense of shock almost. And then it starts storing fat as a safety mechanism. And that's a common pattern we see.
And most of us don't have the patience to do 1 to 2 pounds a week, do we?
Most people don't know.
What is the main reason people come to you?
They usually come to me because they've tried other things in the past and it either didn't work or wasn't sustainable. Now I also do the physical side of thing too. So a big part of my business is personal training, and it could be they've experienced injuries with other trainers or had bad experiences. It could be, I think a lot of trainers, maybe they've been fit their whole lives and they don't have the empathy and understanding to connect well with the client. Where I've been on both extreme ends of the spectrum, from 244 pounds and pre-diabetic to where I am today, which is, I lost 84 pounds of fat and completely transformed my life. But I've been on both ends, and I think it's difficult for a lot of trainers to understand the pitfalls. I hear a lot that, well, they said you just exercise more, eat less, and it looks like they're doing the right things, and they're not eating a lot of food, but their hormonal spectrum hasn't been considered, and it wasn't an individualized approach, and that's why it's not working. And then they just feel this shame because they're not seeing progress, where it's not for lack of effort, it's for lack of the wrong effort in the wrong places.
When people come to you and they have been successful after working with you, are they the ones that are coachable?
There is a coachability factor. If they're not willing to make some changes, which it is my job to figure out what are the appropriate changes and how big of a change, and I do coach that. But I have ran into clients who just refuse to do anything.
Mhm.
So there is a coachability factor. That being said, in 10 years, I've worked with over 3,000 people, and there's less than 10 people I ran into who just weren't coachable enough to see change. It's pretty rare.
Is it usually something that has happened in their life that they finally said, "Okay, enough. I've got to address this," and that's why they come to you? Oh, think we got a freeze on Brandon's end here. Um, Brandon, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep. Let me go back. Did you hear my original question?
I heard 80% of it.
All right. Well, 80% of me is really good. So, but let me finish out the last 20. Is there usually some life event that happened that made them finally say, okay, enough? And then they end up going to you?
It can be a lot of times. Typically, it's a health scare. I stay within my scope as a nutrition coach, which is a little different than a dietitian. But I do get a lot of people with diabetes scares. So they're pre diabetic or they had some incidents. Sometimes it's a number on a scale, sometimes it's an embarrassing situation. I even had one client, a chair broke under her, which could also be just the structural integrity of the chair. But sometimes that can be, but typically it's a collection of frustration over years.
Is there a commonality of age and anything like that of the people that come to you, or is it just all over the spectrum?
I've worked with as young as 8, and I've worked with people in their 80s, but I would say the bulk of the people I work with tend to be between their 30s and 50s. But I'm happy to work with anyone. And I think, especially as people get into their 30s, they're finding putting in the same effort they used to put in is no longer equating to the same change. And they're seeing diminishing returns. And it's my job to figure out hormonally what could be causing
If we can go back to our 17-year-old selves, we would tell ourselves, "It's gonna get harder."
that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we sure would.
You talk about your story, and you'd mentioned earlier 200 you were up to 244 pounds, you were pre-diabetic. Since then, you've lost 84 pounds, you kept it off for 8 years, so we're gonna talk about that in a second on keeping it off, 'cause I'll ask you in a second if that's harder or easier than actually getting it off. But what made you say enough is enough?
So, me personally, it was seeing the 244. I remember the seatbelt in my car cutting into me. I remember just keep going up pant sizes and that digging into me. I was insomniatic. There's a 6-month period of my life I have very little recognition of because my sleep patterns and eating patterns took their toll on your brain. So when you don't sleep and when you have too much sugar, you have an increase in amyloid beta plaque buildup. in your brain. That's Alzheimer's, that's memory loss. And realizing that was terrifying and a wake up call. But it was a collection of those things and then a picture of me on social media. And I just couldn't believe that I was looking at myself in that picture and how big I'd ballooned.
So what are the first 2 or 3 steps you took?
The very first thing was just to cut out soda. So I was still eating at Taco Bell and McDonald's and Arby's, crushing the dollar menu, but I cut out soda and lost 10 pounds still eating garbage foods. And I think that's a good place for a lot of people to start.
Mm,
I do a demonstration with the Mountain Dew, and then I take a bag of cane sugar and I show you how many teaspoons. It's 19 and a half
yeah.
teaspoons. So you have several inches of standing sugar in one soda. And even worse is it's worse than cane sugar. It's high fructose corn syrup, which has a higher propensity to be stored as fat in the liver, which is why 1 in 2 Americans are thought to have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease by age 50. That's insane. And part of that is the high fructose corn syrup that's prevalent in sodas.
Then did you once you started doing that, you saw a little bit of success, and did that build your confidence in, "Okay, I think I can do this?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really did. So I think a small change, just changing one thing at a time, is the best way to start. And for a lot of people, I think cutting soda could be
Yeah.
one of the most impactful things. Now that includes diet sodas. So even though diet sodas might be sugar free, they're using sucralose and aspartame and saccharin. And sucralose, people don't know this, but it was initially used in pesticides because it would attract bugs and make their intestines explode, killing them and diminishing the population. So some scientist or human will, hey, it's a sweetener, and if we just have a little bit, it won't make humans' guts explode. But with IBS on the rise and all these gut issues, when we add that, it can really exacerbate that and cause significant gastrointestinal issues for people if there's too much of that in their diet.
Yeah, back in the day, I drank a lot of Diet Coke, and you mentioned the dollar menu, which is both a curse and a blessing depending on your where you are in your life. But those big gulps were wonderful, Brandon. Every single sip of that was so good. It's
Yeah.
so bad.
Oh yeah, I used to get in trouble with the coffee creamers, and I'd go to Sheets or something, and I'd put in 36 pumps, something absurd. True story. I put in, I said a little bit's good, a little more. Ooh, it's even sweeter.
Yeah,
So I just sat there. I probably put like 10 of those little things in, and I remember having to pull over and just vomited.
yeah.
It was awful, but I was so addicted to that sugar content.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and I've gotten off, diet sodas, so I haven't had one in years, but I do enjoy sweet tea, so I have to watch myself on that because not only is that a weight thing, it's a for your teeth, sugar everywhere is not good, but, when you stepped on the scale at 244 pounds, how old were you?
I was in college. I think it was either my sophomore or junior year.
Mm.
So I would have been 19 or 20.
Did you gradually add that weight over a few years? How did that work?
I was always a chunky kid growing up, got picked on quite a bit, teased, beat up, all the things. And in high school, I spent a year or two doing cross country for no other reason than to lose weight. I had no interest in running, but but it worked. And it gave me some confidence. But then I decided to go the music route. I actually was a band director for 4 years. Um, but going back to college, I put on probably close to 60 pounds in the first couple of years. Because on the dining halls, it was all you can eat. And then they
Oh,
had something called
yeah.
premium night, where you can go through like the Bananas Foster line again and
Yeah.
again, and the cereals. Um, but I was also a very dedicated practicer to my instrument. I was a trumpet major, and I'd stay up till 2, 3 in the morning, and then I would rely on some of those sugary foods to keep me awake.
Mm.
And I'd write music and do all kinds of stuff. But I wasn't quite realizing the effect on my health from sitting all day, not sleeping, and eating all these foods. And I probably put on 60 pounds in about two years or less. It was quick.
I remember growing up, I didn't get picked on weight-wise, I wasn't that chunky, but it's politically incorrect today, I think, but I used to shop in the husky section
Yeah,
because some pants were a tough fit because I had good thighs because I was an athlete, but I had a little bit of a belly. I've never had a six pack, so I don't know what that's like. But I do remember the meal plan at Tennessee, and it was other than Sunday night, dinner, we could go in whenever we wanted to, and we could get ice cream in oh, yeah. Oh, that's
yeah,
again, both a curse and a blessing.
yeah. We had a Sparrow pizza line. We
Yep.
had a
Oh, yeah.
pirate grill where I'd get a bacon grilled cheese and a thing of fries probably 3 times a week at
Yep.
10 o'clock at night.
Yep.
But really, I think it was the caramel frozen coffee drinks. I would crush those, and I had no idea they'd had up to 100 grams of sugar in them.
Oh,
And
jeez.
so if you divide grams of sugar by four, every 4 grams is equivalent of a teaspoon. So you're talking about 25 teaspoons of sugar in
Oh,
one drink. And I was so addicted to those.
you brought up a good point, though, in talking about playing the trumpet is just a routine, a schedule of, okay, after 11, I'm not gonna do this, or I'm gonna go to bed, or I'm not gonna eat after 11, or just getting up and moving around. Because a lot of us, especially during COVID, we've been sitting a lot because 'cause we're not getting out of the house.
Yeah, so it's a little bit worse now because of the technology aspect, but I think the sleep schedule is something we should touch on, and that's impact in your health. So when I was staying up late, regardless of activity level, hormones are thrown completely off.
Mm,
So we have photoreceptors in our retina and in our skin that when they receive light, whether it's from the sun or your computer, it doesn't know the difference. It's going to upregulate hormones like norepinephrine and adrenaline. And these are inflammatory hormones that are kind of catabolic on the body. And that throws off serotonin levels and dopamine and all kinds of other things. So that pattern is going to increase weight gain. Also, when we lack sleep, glucose is cut off between our amygdala and our prefrontal cortex. So, in simple terms, the amygdala is your caveman brain: red good, fire bad, Jane pretty. And then prefrontal cortex, that's what separates humans from every other species on the planet. It's the higher level thinking. So, if you're lacking sleep, those two parts of the brain get cut off and you can't say no as easily. So, your self discipline goes out the window, and then you're going to make more poor choices. So lack of sleep at night is going to lead to more poor choices of eating in the day.
yeah.
So that's one thing, but also the lack of movement is huge too. We get adhesions, we get stiffness, we get without as much blood flow and movement, your muscles aren't contracting as much. So what that does is it diminishes the amount of glycogen we're using for energy, which gets turned into more blood sugar,
Mm.
which then has to be stored as fat. So I do think if you do have to sit for a long time, or if you do have to work late in the night, getting up and moving is really important. A lot of people will set timers, or if you have an Apple Watch, it'll yell at you and tell you to do that, which can be helpful. But also investing in blue light blocking glasses, or turning your iPhone or computer into night shift mode. Samsung and some of the others might have something similar, which blocks some of that blue wavelength light, so you don't get quite the hormonal disturbance.
And I like that all those matter. They're all pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
We are here with Brandon Woolley, owner of Fire Within Nutrition and Fitness. Brandon's a part of RD48, the BNI chapter called The Next Level. They meet in Cary Thursday mornings at 8:15. Right now, they are on Zoom. So if you want to meet some folks there, you're going to meet a lot of people that have had years of experience in their industry, know a lot of people. They can help you grow your business. Today's show is brought to you by Oak City Tech. We talk a lot about who owns your name, image, and likeness, to use the sports analogy right now, on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. They can shut them all down, folks. We've heard stories every day about somebody saying something somebody doesn't agree with, whoever it is, whatever it is, and they shut you down. But one of the things you can control are email lists and things like that. So go to oakcitytech.com. Tell them what you're looking for. I know they'll be able to help you. All right, Brandon, one of the nice things for my generation is we're living longer and we're still young. And we still want to do a lot of things. We're more active than 60-year-olds were back in the 50s, probably, and even the 60s. So we start getting into our 50s and 60s. What are some things we need to be thinking about?
I would say collagen and bone health. Um, as we age, it gets harder to assimilate things into bone structure, and we start accumulating arthritic types of conditions, which a lot of people don't know this, but wheat grain and corn are one of the primary contributors, and sugar in general. And the reason this happens is a process called glycation. So sugar is going to stick to protein molecules and cause damage. And that's where some of that arthritic buildup comes from. And simply by living longer, you're going to have more sustained exposure to the things that accumulate to cause arthritis. So I think reducing, not eliminating, but at least reducing the intake of wheat grain and corn products and sugar in general could go a long way in helping arthritis. I've even had people in their 70s change their diet and get rid of arthritis medication with their doctor's approval. So that's a huge part. And we don't get as much collagen from foods anymore because we always purchase boneless, skinless. We're not eating meat off the bone anymore. And collagen lives between the meat and that bone. It's that fibrous tissue. And we need collagen for cartilage, for joint support, and skin health. So, including bone broth as opposed to stock, like chicken stock in your soups, if you choose to change over to bone broth, you'll get collagen that way. You can get collagen powders. And keep your protein intake at least above the minimum required to sustain that. A lot of people don't know that protein is also used for bone assimilation. And especially women, if you're not taking in enough protein as you age, you could be accelerating towards osteopenia and eventually osteoporosis.
The number one thing we can drink is water.
I think that's the most important thing to drink, absolutely. If you're 1% dehydrated, only 1%, that's going to cause increase in blood pressure. So, not drinking enough water can actually contribute to heart disease, which is shocking to a lot of people. But in addition to that, in order to reassimilate bone in your discs, because I know lumbar and lower back issues as we age become more and more problematic, that assimilation process happens through osmosis, and you have to be well hydrated for osmosis to occur. It needs water. So absolutely, water is incredibly important.
What is your best client story that told you I'm doing the right thing?
So my first client that I worked with as a nutrition coach, his numbers were such that he had one more doctor's visit before they were going to put him on metformin, and he'd be considered diabetic. And I was just getting my certs then. I didn't know a lot about that side of things. And as I researched and understand, we implemented, and his numbers came down and down. And he had a deadline, and he had that doctor's appointment, and he was so happy. I'll give his first name Jorge, and but he was just ecstatic. He got his numbers down and didn't have to go down that diabetic route. That was the first one. But I've had tons of transformations where people got to things they never thought they could achieve, and it's not so much the number on the scale, but it's the confidence it gives them, the quality of life, the ability to play with their kids and have energy, and even as we change the diet, serotonin, which is 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut, the feel good hormone starts to increase. I've had clients with their doctor's approval be able to get rid of anxiety and depression medications as their body started to normalize. And that's a really cool feeling too.
Do you have a real quick, by the end of the week, remedy for bad backs for people like me?
Real quick, maybe not quick. There are stretches that tend to
Yeah,
help the most.
they
There's a
do.
muscle that attaches between your hip and low back called the piriformis. That tends to be overactive in a lot of people because our glutes are underactive from the amount of sitting we do. That tends to be a large contributor. I did have a VP of a company who did a lot of flying, and we stretched that muscle, and she slept without pain for the first time in 20 years.
Wow.
Um, But everybody is different,
Yep.
and it's out of my scope to diagnose things. I can make suggestions and see if they help. So I think that's a major one. Stretching that piriformis pigeon pose from yoga is one of the exercises that seems to help quite a bit with that. Magnesium and Epsom salt tends to alleviate tight muscles. So Epsom salt baths can give some temporary relief. But I think the mobility aspect and stretching and strengthening the glutes makes a huge difference. The more the glutes fire, the less those overactive muscles fire, and they start to relieve some of the tension and pulling on those lower back areas.
What can we do to get to know our body better so we can start trying to figure out what we need to eliminate or do more of?
Well, the fastest way is to find a trained professional that can help you get there quickly. It took me 10 years of research to get to the body of knowledge I have now, and most people aren't going to spend 90% of their free time researching that. But I think that's the easiest thing if you can find a qualified health expert to help you get there safely and quicker. That's the best way, and it just depends on the amount of time you have and the amount of the financial expenditure you have for something like that. But having a team of people you trust outside of just Western medicine doctors, for some people, they can get a lot of help from a chiropractor. Um, Certainly, a personal trainer can make a big difference. And I would consider adding to your team in tandem with Western medicine a functional doctor. I work with Dr. Susan Lavelle with Premier Wellness, and she's wonderful. So if any of my clients need blood work, or myself or my wife, who's working with her now as we work towards having a child, a functional perspective that talks about the causes of hormonal change as opposed to just fixing a symptom can be huge. And I still love our Western medicine doctors. I wouldn't be here without them. I've been hospitalized on several occasions and they saved my life. So I'm certainly not against Western medicine, but I don't think they do as good of a job on the preventative side and figuring out the root cause and fixing that. So that functional perspective makes a huge difference.
That's an interesting point you bring up because most of us in general, be it our physical body, our business body, our mind, we're so focused on rehab that we forget about the preventative maintenance in anything to keep as best we can to keep something bad from happening.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that sets apart what I do is I build maintenance into the training programs. We call them corrective exercises. And there doesn't have to be a problem to warrant doing a corrective exercise. The most common thing I see and my biggest fear in my clients as they age is called upper cross syndrome, which is these forward rounded shoulders.
Yep.
And that's because we text and we drive and we're always in this position as Americans. It's kind of newer to the human experience. And what starts to happen is we get degeneration of the cervical spine. And I've had several clients have to undergo emergency surgery because that degeneration was starting to cut into their spinal cord, risking paralysis. And there's one very simple exercise that anybody can do with or without equipment. It's an external rotation of the hands backwards. And I'll just lean over so you can see my thumb, but I'll just do it this way. The thumb should externally rotate backwards as you squeeze the shoulder blades and push the chest forward. You could also do this with a band. We call them band pull aparts. But even just sitting at your desk and doing a couple of these squeezes, that one exercise prevents all of those issues and can go a long way.
I hate to be the old guy, get off my lawn guy. Actually, I'm not fooling anybody. I enjoy that sometimes. But the younger generations growing up and their thumbs on the phones, 24/7, man, they're gonna
Yeah.
have problems, aren't they?
Yeah. Now I'm even running into people in their 30s with tendonitis in here, and
Yep.
it's not from typing, it's from texting.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's such an issue that even the latest update of the iOS for Apple phones, they realize this is a problem and they moved the URL bar to the bottom so you don't have to reach as high, which is leading to some of those tendonitis issues.
interesting. Well, that's why I text with my index finger because A, I'm slow, and B, 2 thumbs, big old clunky thumbs, not gonna work. So, when I was on your website the other day getting, ready for the show, 2 things you do that I find very interesting because 'cause they're both needed. One is you offer guided grocery store shopping, with that, and then the home kitchen makeover. Man, the shopping is tough because I walked by that bin of double stuffed Oreos, Brandon. Oh, man. So far, I haven't bought any in a while, but I'm taking 3 looks sometimes now when I walk by. Uh, but we laugh. The rule of thumb is don't go shopping when you're hungry, correct?
That's a great rule of thumb to
Yeah.
follow. Absolutely.
And just follow the list. How many of us are good at that?
Well, it depends. Not everybody's educated on what on the list could be problematic.
Yeah.
Um, but other general rules of thumb are to stay on the perimeter primarily. If it's on those middle aisles and can be
Yep.
stable for months and months, chances are it's not a good food.
Yep.
There's only a couple of things I'll get on the inner aisles: organic coffee. And I get organic because most every coffee bean that's not is sprayed with glyphosate, which is an ingredient in Roundup, or the primary ingredient in it, um, or maybe almond butter, things like that. But there's not a whole lot worth getting on those inner aisles. Um,
No, but they all
but
taste good, don't they?
yeah, they sure do. Now, I do follow an 80-20 principle once you get to where you want to be. And it just depends on how fast you want to accelerate to your goals. I don't think it's sustainable to say never eat an Oreo.
Yeah.
Life's way too short for that. Um, but it also depends on what you have going on. So if you're celiac, then yeah, you should never eat Oreo. But if you don't have any significant problems, I think once in a while it's okay to have those things as long as it doesn't lead to a landslide of
Yep.
bad decisions. And by not being having a full hard set deprivation of those, I think it's easier to stay on track most of the time.
Yes.
Um, but there's all kinds of brands now that are coming out with incredible alternatives that still taste good to a lot of our favorite snack foods. There's a brand called Siete, like spelled like the number 7 in Spanish. They make these like wedding cookies. It's like a shortbread cookie covered in powdered sugar. But the kicker is there's no wheat, grain, corn, soy, or dairy. They use cassava flour, which is from a potato, where wheat grain and corn are going to cause more of those fatty liver issues and other hormonal problems. And then there's another brand out there called Simple Mills. And they just make tons of stuff. We just made some almond flour brownies last night that were fantastic. So there are tons of alternatives there didn't used to be that still taste great, but you're not going to have all the hormonal implications and bad oils and things like that
It
associated.
it took me years to figure out if I don't have it in the house, I can't eat it, and that's kind of the first thing I do is try to keep it out of the house, and Halloween was hard. So
Bingo. There's an interesting book called Nudge that talks a little bit about how we can influence behaviors without it being in your face. And one of the things they talk about is if there's a bowl of cashews out on the table and there's a big meal coming, people will still eat that full bowl of
Mhm.
cashews and make themselves sick. But if the host removes them, part of it is, man, I still want to eat those. It's a bummer they're gone, but I'm going to enjoy my meal better. So by removing that as an option, they're all a lot happier and they don't feel sick by the end of the night. But there's a lot to be said, and that's why if I do go on a cheat, it's not coming home in my grocery list. It'll be out somewhere. If I go to the state fair or food truck rodeo or something, I don't feel bad about those things. They're rare, but my weekly grocery budget never includes any ingredient I would deem not healthy.
Yeah. Uh,
And I
y
have no problem eating a piece of cake and throwing out the rest of it. I've done
there you
that
go.
many.
Yep. But you gotta learn what you want, and if you want, again, this with anything in life is what do you really want, and generally, if we really want that, we'll work towards that no matter what it is. You had mentioned earlier your wife, Michelle, one of my favorite questions to ask guests. So how did you and Michelle meet, and do you both tell the story the same way?
I think we tell it the same way. We met through a dating app called Bumble, and we met at the North Carolina Museum of Art for a walk first, so she can determine if I was a serial killer or not.
Okay.
And the other thing is, anybody that I dated back then, they had to be okay with my dog. I have a Shiba Inu named Molly, and she's 6 years old. And so the first date, they have to, I want to see if they're active. Will they go on a walk with me and be okay with being outdoors and moving? And so after that, we got some Italian food in downtown Cary, and then went for goat yoga. So our very first date was a walk and then goat yoga, which was kind of a bizarre first date. And I figured if she was down for that, she was okay.
Do I really want to know what goat yoga is?
Yeah, so literally, there's not a lot of yoga going on. It's really hanging out with goats, is what it should be called. But they'll take you through a couple poses, and they'll jump on your back. They'll lay down in front of you. You can pet them. It was really a fun experience. You got to be careful because they'll eat anything, though. So no earrings and necklaces. But it was super fun. I recommend it. They are animals. Mine urinated, defecated, and vomited on my towel, and they said that's good luck because it's a trifecta, which is like a hat trick in hockey, I suppose. Um,
Well, it sealed
but
the deal with Michelle, right?
sealed the deal with Michelle, and she gave me her towel. No, but the fact that she was open to these crazy experiences, she was willing to be active. She was cool with my dog, who I actually let lick the soup bowl, and she was okay with that too, sort of. I said, "All right, this one's all right." So
Now she met the chiseled down hunk of a guy named Brandon, right?
yeah, I was in my prime then.
Okay. All right.
Um, yeah. And then as you date and get comfortable with people, you kind of settle into something a little different.
I
Um,
when so if you come to my house or you go to your, her, let's say her family's house, or you're starting to meet her friends and her family and stuff like that, are you judgy McJudge on what's on the kitchen table to eat and what people are snacking on, or do you just sit there quietly?
I tend to sit there quietly. When I'm in somebody else's house, I just, I go with the flow because I know it's temporary. But there were many jokes those first 6 months about, oh, he's coming over to ruin food for us. And so they'll say, just don't tell me what's in this. Let me enjoy it.
Yeah.
But no, I don't judge people, especially as a guest. We definitely don't eat particularly healthy when we visit our folks. There's usually cookies involved and all kinds of nonsense. But but no, I think it's important not to judge people. I don't think it's ever helped or changed anybody's mind.
Mm.
If somebody's curious and they come to me or have questions, then I'll address it. But I've never once changed anybody's mind mid-eating, telling them, this is horrible for you and here's why. Typically,
It's kinda like Twitter, isn't it? You can scream all you want, but you're not gonna change anybody's mind.
100%.
But
Absolutely.
my guess is, though, that the best conversations you've had is at those parties, and somebody does pull you aside, say, "Hey, can I get your number? I wanna call you and chat more."
It does happen. It does happen. Absolutely.
Are you also that type? Because certain industries, when they're at, 4th of July cul-de-sac picnics or Christmas parties, they always get, "Hey, and CPAs get this and lawyers get this. Do you get this? "Hey, Brandon, quick question for you on something I've been eating or wanna eat." You get those type of questions?
All the time. I get texts. People send me the nutrition labels of foods and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" But I do get that a lot. Or what's a healthy option to eat while we're on the road? Stuff like that. I
It
love it.
yeah.
It means people are making a change and they're starting to change their thinking and be
Yeah,
conscious.
yeah, and, so what tips do you give for traveling? Because that's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah. So I always divert to those Siete Simple Mills, those types of brands that I discussed earlier. They don't use the harmful oils. There's less wheat grain, corn, soy, dairy. If you can find a soy free beef jerky, that's a good high protein snack. If you're pulling over, Sheets usually has boiled eggs. For some people, Greek yogurt may be a good option. I do try and stay away from dairy, but at least Greek yogurt is fermented a little more and has less lactose. So that's a high protein snack most gas stations carry. Um, if there's restaurants now like Kava And there's another one called Core Life Eatery. If you could find one of those nearby, they have really healthy options, rotisserie chicken type restaurants. Like, what's the Peruvian chicken place? I can never remember the name of it. Um,
Don't know.
Alpacas.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so that's going to be at least a better option. I'm sure they're using the wrong oils. You can do grilled chicken and stuff at Chick-fil-A. It's just pretty tough not to also order a milkshake if you're there. Um, but I think most every restaurant has better options. If it's a sit-down place, you can choose how the food is prepared usually, and you can swap out your sides. So if it's typically paired with Gouda macaroni and cheese, maybe you can swap it out with a sweet potato. If the chicken's usually prepared in a cream sauce, you can ask it to be blackened instead. I do that with salmon all the time.
But if you're taking a road trip to the beach or the mountains, so 2.5 to 4 hours, depending on where you're going, you're a fan of packing your own snacks because you know what's in them.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Me and my wife always make a snack run the night before, always, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh, okay, another good marriage tip. I like that. Snack
Oh yeah,
runs for trip.
and we also have one if you want one really bad thing on the road because it's rare for us. There's no judgment, and if you want to crush a bag of Cheetos, go for it. But the rest of the snacks have to be okay.
Yeah, I'm a French fry guy. Those are
Yeah.
because easy to drive and eat those, and I can eat them cold, I can eat them hot, just like pizza. There's no such thing as bad pizza or bad French fries. So folks, this is Brandon. One of the things I like about is, and Brandon and I have known each other just a little bit, but I've known some people that have spoken highly of what he does, and we all, like we talked at the beginning of the show, most of us want to do it, but not enough of us get around to it. So go find a professional like Brandon. We put his number up on the screen here during the show. What's your website, Brandon?
Fire Within NF.com, and that's NF as in nutrition and fitness.
Nice.
Fire Within NF.com.
And he talks about his program. He talks about the different things like the shopping and the home kitchen makeover. We've got some tips on there, some good stuff. So if you're at least even mildly interested, go to a place, go to somebody like Brandon and get a plan, because everybody's body is different, but just get a plan and just sit down with him for 20 minutes, ask a couple questions and figure out if it's right for you. So Brandon, have enjoyed it very much today. Love the tips, because you're right though. There's so many substitutes now that we didn't have 10 years ago. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And if we're just smart in understanding, hey, you know what? I can do without that for 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is, will probably be better. So have enjoyed it very much. Good luck with the business. And we'll see everybody next time on Triangle BNI.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.